so much. So I just have to ask, do you get eggs on the pizza or eggs separately from the pizza?
Yeah.
Both. Okay. All right. I'm going to do eggs on the pizza. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here bright and early on a, what day is it? Thursday morning. I've had a great time in Iowa. I've been here since Monday night. I'll be here until Sunday morning, and just have had such a warm welcome everywhere. And so thank you all for welcoming me this morning as well. I think our nation is at a pivotal point. I think we don't have endless time to change the direction that we're going. And I think you feel that as well. And that's why in probably less than a couple weeks now, I'm going to officially throw my hat in the ring. But before I do that, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself, so you can get to know me. And I want to leave plenty of time for your questions, so I'll try and keep my remarks brief. You know, all of us, I think, remember certain moments in our life that really make a big difference the older we grow. And so one of those moments happened to me when I was 8 years old. I was in Sunday school. My mother was my Sunday school teacher that year. And she looked at me one Sunday morning and she said, "What you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God." And those words really landed in my young life. I think they landed because I didn't feel very gifted, honestly, and didn't feel gifted for most of my young life. You know, everybody seemed smarter and better than me, than more together than me, and I had a beautiful and talented older sister and a star athlete for a younger brother, and I was kind of stuck in the middle. So her words almost seemed like a promise. You have gifts. You just have to find them. And they seemed like a challenge as well, that I needed to go use them, whatever they were. Fast forward, I enrolled in Stanford University. I was very fortunate. It's a wonderful school. But I graduated with a degree in medieval history and philosophy in the middle of a recession. So that made me all dressed up and know where to go. So I went off to law school. My dad was a law professor, and he thought that would be good if I went to law school. My husband to this day says I should have been a lawyer. I argue with him so much, but that's another story. Maybe some of your husbands say that to you as well. In any event, I hated law school, really hated it. And so I quit after less than a single semester, and now I need to earn a living. And so I go back to work doing full-time what I had done part-time to help pay the bills in college. I was a Kelly girl in college. I don't know how many of you remember Kelly girls, but we were young women, mostly, not always, who worked as temporary office personnel in local businesses. My mother had insisted that I learn how to type in 8th grade, for which I am very grateful, because I earned a good living. And one of the best jobs I had was during the summer, when I was in college, was to type in the shipping department of Hewlett-Packard. I typed with 8 other women. We typed bills of lading. We don't even have bills of lading you type anymore. My granddaughters have no idea what I mean when I talk about typing. And isn't that weird, by the way? They don't know why we dial the phone. My granddaughter said to me the other day, I said, "Well, I'll call you." She said, or no, I said, "I'll email you from the road." She said, "Sissy, nobody emails anymore. You text."
Hillary does.
Yeah. Yes, she does. Yes, she does. Hillary, newsflash, I have 4 accounts on my single device. In any event. Yeah, exactly. Delete, delete, delete. And then wipes the server clean just to be sure. By the way, on that note, you know, the funniest thing to me was when she said in her news conference that we didn't need to worry about the confidentiality of her communications because she had 2 Secret Service agents guarding the server. You know, we're not worried about it getting stolen. We're worried about it getting hacked. But in any event, I digress. So I texted to my granddaughter yesterday, Emojis are wonderful things, you know? You know emojis? Anyway, I texted her pigs and cows. She thought that was cool. From Iowa. In any event, I went to the want ads as an unemployed medieval history and philosophy major and law school dropout. I took the first job I was offered, which was to type and file in a little 9-person real estate firm. I answered the phones. I was lucky to have a job. And about 6 months into that job, 2 men who worked there came up to my desk and said, you know, we've been watching you. Do you think you could do more than type and file? Do you want to know what we do? And that was my introduction to business, honestly. I'd never thought about business, but they sort of took me under their wing, and I found I liked the teamwork of business and the numbers of business and the practicality of business. It was an act of leadership and generosity that I'll never forget, and because they saw possibilities in me, I saw possibilities in myself that I didn't know were there. I would go on to get an MBA. I would start work as an entry-level salesperson at the Bell System in Washington, D.C., when it was 1 million employees, AT&T. It's there that I met my husband, Frank, 34 years ago. He started out as a tow truck driver in a family-owned auto body shop in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and eventually went on to become an executive at AT&T. When I met him, he had 2 little girls, Tracy and Lori. I wasn't able to have children of my own, and so he came with a wonderful family, which was a great gift. I've been all over the world, lived in many parts of the world, worked in virtually every part of the world. And I know that it is only in the United States of America that a young woman can start as a medieval history and philosophy major, a law school dropout, and a receptionist in a 9-person real estate firm, and go on to become the chief executive of the largest technology company in the world, and maybe, just maybe, run for the presidency of the United States. That's only possible. And it's possible here, I think, because our founders knew what my mother taught me. Our founders knew that everybody has God-given gifts. And they founded a nation on the visionary idea, and it was radical at the time, and it's visionary still. They founded a nation on a visionary idea that here, everyone has potential and everyone has the right to fulfill their potential. And that right comes from God and shouldn't be taken away by man or government. That's what they meant when they said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You may applaud, sir, because it was a huge idea. And so because they founded a nation on that idea, that everybody has the right to fulfill their potential, more things have been more possible for more people, for more places here than anywhere else on the face of the earth.
Are you saying this country is exceptional?
Yes, what a concept. It's exceptional. It's exceptional. And you know, as I have gone throughout my life, I have learned that indeed, everyone does have God-given gifts. In fact, I know that human potential, American potential, is a limitless resource. And when we apply it to common goals, to worthy purpose, then truly anything can be done. I've learned it over and over again. People ask me, how did you become a CEO? Did you have a plan to become a CEO? The truth is I didn't. The truth is when I went to work, I found that I liked challenges. And so I would run to problems. And every time I ran to a problem, it turned out there were people who knew that problem existed. And they actually knew what to do about it, it's just nobody had ever asked. And so I would gather people up and I would unlock their potential and say, what are we going to do about this? We'd figure it out, we'd solve the problem, and one problem led to the next. And so when I arrived at Hewlett-Packard, I found a company that was lagging behind. And you know, in technology, in the 21st century, if you're lagging, you're failing. You got to be leading. You got to be leading. A technology company does, this nation does. And so together with the great people of that company, we doubled the business to almost $90 billion. We tripled the rate of innovation to 11 patents a day. We took the growth rate from 2% to 9%. We quadrupled cash flow. We went from lagging in every market and every product category to leading in all. Or I could tell you about some of the people I've met in my philanthropic work. I could tell you about the young mothers I met in Norfolk, Virginia, when I was distributing diapers as the chair of Good 360. It's one of the charities that I serve as chairman of. We take excess or obsolete inventory from companies, and instead of all that ending up in a landfill, and too much of it does, we distribute it to 45,000 charities in this country. We do books, technology, toys, clothes, shoes, diapers, shampoo, all that stuff ends up in a landfill and people need it. And so I was there distributing diapers. And these young mothers who had the courage to bring their children into the world despite difficult circumstances, they talked to me about what they wanted in their lives. They were filled with hope and determination because they too have God-given gifts. You know, everyone needs somebody to take a chance on them. I did. I have. Everybody needs somebody to give them a helping hand sometimes. My husband Frank and I and our family, we have been very fortunate in our lives. We have been blessed in so many ways. And yet, like everyone else, we've had our hard times too. I fought a long battle with cancer, and that is a family affair, if you know anyone who's been touched by cancer. And it was the strength of our family and the power of our faith and the kindness of many strangers that got us through that. And when we lost our younger daughter, Lori, to the demons of addiction, once again, we counted on many helping hands. I have to say, as I travel throughout this nation, and I have been talking to Americans about all kinds of issues for the last decade or so, I sense a deep disquiet. And that's why I think we are at a pivotal point. I think people are disquieted. Can you hear me? Okay. I think people are disquieted because they fear we're losing something. And I think they are disquieted because they think we're missing something. And I think what people fear we're losing is the sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation. This nation has always been defined by a sense that if it was worth doing, we would do it. And if it was hard to do, even better, we would do it. And our own lives were defined by a sense of possibility, that our lives, that our futures were going to be determined by our God-given gifts and the possibilities that lay in front of us. And we just knew that our children and our grandchildren's lives would be filled with even greater possibilities. And yet people don't feel that way anymore. You see it, I see it when you nod your heads, you see it in polls, you see it all over. And when we lose the sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation, we are losing the core of who we are. And I think people think we're missing leadership. So it's worth talking a moment about what leadership is, because I think people get very confused about it. So first I would say leadership is not the same as management. You know, management is doing the best you can within existing constraints and conditions. That's what management is. And we got a lot of managers. We got managers in businesses. They do the best they can within existing constraints and conditions. They don't change the system, they work the system. And we got managers in life, and we got managers in politics too, who talk a good game but who don't actually change anything ever, because the system is working for them. Leadership is also not about position or power or title. I used to think it was. When I was a secretary, I thought, well, the guy with the big corner office, that's the leader. The guy with the biggest parking space, that's the leader. The guy with the perks and the title, that's the leader. But then I got older and wiser, and I observed that there were people with lots of big offices and big titles who were not leading at all. We have one of those in the White House today, unfortunately. Leadership is not management. Leaders do not accept the system as it is just because it's been that way for a long time. The highest calling of leadership is to change the order of things for the better. The highest calling of leadership is not to acquire title or position or power. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. And so I believe we are now at this pivotal point where we need a leader in the White House who understands their job. is to unlock once again the potential of this great nation, restore the promise of this great nation, and change the order of things for the better, because the political system isn't working anymore. I said our founding fathers said that the right to fulfill our potential comes from God and should not be taken away by man or government, but the truth is people's possibilities are being crushed by the weight, the power, the corruption, and the complexity of our federal government. And you see it everywhere. I see it. Remember I told you about those women to whom I was distributing diapers? These women were talking to me about what they hope for in their lives, and yet their lives are tangled up in webs of dependence. And they can't get out even if they want to, because we make the choices so hard for them. Poor people are not poor because they lack God-given gifts. Poor people are not poor because they lack the ambition to build a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. But we tangle them up and make the choices so hard. I hear Republicans sometimes talk about we need a work requirement and welfare reform to save money. No, no, no. Yes, it will save money, but that's not why we need to do it. We need a work requirement and welfare reform to save lives. Because dignity comes from work, and family brings purpose, and faith brings meaning to our lives. So we have to disentangle those webs of dependence around people's lives and encourage them to step forward and work harder and do more, and reward them for doing that, not put in front of them huge risks as we do today, especially those single moms with a couple kids. And what are we doing to the economic engine of this nation? We talk about all these big companies, and I was the CEO of one, but the truth is, it is not big companies that make this country go. It's the real estate firm with 9 people. It's the family-owned auto body shop. It is family-owned businesses, farms, and small and new businesses that create 2/3 of the new jobs in this country and employ half the people. And we are crushing them. Crony capitalism is alive and well in Washington, D.C., ladies and gentlemen, and it has been going on for a very long time under Republicans and Democrats alike. It's worse under this president, much worse. But let's just look at what happened with the financial crisis. Who started the financial crisis? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And there were 24 or 25 federal government agencies that were supposed to be overseeing the financial system. And apparently they all failed in their job because we had a big crash and everyday Americans were hurt. And so what did we do? We passed, of course Republicans didn't, but nevertheless we passed Dodd-Frank and created a whole brand new federal government agency. We haven't reformed Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, not one bit. We haven't reformed the 25 other agencies. We created another huge bureaucracy. But here's why I say crony capitalism is alive and well. Because the consequence of that huge piece of legislation, accompanied by massive regulation. I could be picking Obamacare, I could be picking the EPA, it doesn't matter. The consequence is all the same. The big get bigger, the small get crushed. So 10 Wall Street banks too big to fail are now 5. Even bigger banks, still too big to fail. And 3,000 community banks have gone out of business since Dodd-Frank passed. And that matters, because they're the ones that give family and small businesses their helping hand. We are now, for the first time in U.S. history, we are destroying more businesses than we are creating. Think about that. We are destroying more businesses than we're creating. And so what does that mean? It means our main streets will never get growing and growing again. It means we're not going to be able to create enough jobs because the businesses we're destroying, the little guys, they're the ones that drive the nation. You know, think about our federal government today. Think about it just, you know, from a business point of view. Imagine a business, any business, doesn't matter. Imagine a business where you said for almost 50 years, you know, no matter what you do, you're going to get more money every year after year after year. There are no goals. There are no metrics for performance. There are no penalties for non-performance. Everybody earns the same pay, pension, and benefits no matter what kind of job they do. So we know you can watch pornography all day long in government. We've seen many Inspector General reports that tell us this. You can watch porn all day long and get exactly the same pay, pension, and benefits as somebody trying to do a good job. This has been going on for 50 years, folks. Every department has been getting bigger and bigger. And oh, by the way, we, the investors, the citizens who pay for all this, we have no idea how our money is being spent. And so we just keep piling on the complexity. The tax code gets more complicated. It's literally tens upon tens of thousands of pages. The regulatory thicket gets thicker and thicker. Can you name me one regulation that has ever been repealed? Just one. Name one. We've never repealed one. Everybody's always talking about making government smaller and more efficient, but no one's doing anything about it. So let's talk about what it would actually take to do something about it. It's not just that it's big, bloated, corrupt, costly, so powerful that only the big, the wealthy, and the well-connected can deal with it, and the small and the powerless are getting crushed. That's demonstrably true. All the facts say it. It's not just that, it's that these bureaucracies have turned in on themselves and they do not serve those they are intended to serve, which are the citizens. We could talk about the IRS targeting conservatives. We could talk about so many things, but I like to talk about the VA, the Veterans Administration. How many of you are veterans? Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. This is 2015. Technology can do amazing things. And yet, for a couple decades now, if you're a veteran and you're returning, you're going to spend months filling out paperwork. You're going to spend many more months while some bureaucrat checks your paperwork. You're going to spend many more months waiting for another bureaucrat to tell you you get an appointment. This is a stain on our nation's honor, and it's not a new phenomenon. Politicians like to talk about it, but nobody's fixing it. I'll tell you how long it's been going on. The regional headquarters of the Veterans Administration, the foundations of the building have had to be reinforced because of the weight of the paperwork on the bureaucrat's desk. That's a fact, ladies and gentlemen. This is crazy. You know what I would do? But by the way, when everybody got outraged about Arizona, remember Arizona wait times? Everybody got outraged, as they should have. And so a lot of pressure got put on the political system because people were embarrassed and ashamed that this is how we were treating our nation's heroes. And so people flooded their Congress and senators' offices with comments. And so what happened? In 3 short weeks, a bill got passed. A bipartisan bill saying you can fire the top 400 senior executives at the VA. Kind of a good idea. Maybe we should do that all throughout the government. Maybe we really should. You know what I would do? I would take 10 veterans, 25 years old. I would sit them in a room and I would say, you tell me how you want to be served. I would pick 25-year-old veterans because they understand the power of technology. And that would give us a blueprint that would allow us to reimagine the VA. And that's what we have to do now in government. We have to reimagine it. Let's start with zero-based budgeting so we know how our money is being spent, actually know how our money is being spent. Let's start with pay for performance. Let's quit talking about revenue-neutral tax plans and start talking about revenue-reducing tax plans because the government gets too much revenue. Let's actually do something about the reports that come year after year after year that highlight in excruciating and embarrassing detail hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption, and nothing ever happens because people are working in the system. This takes leadership. It takes leadership. It takes a leader with the vision and the courage and the experience to say, we can do better than this. We are not going to settle for this anymore. But it also takes citizenship. Citizens to say, you know what, ours was intended to be a citizen government. It's what by, for, and of the people means. And why? Why have we gotten to a place where we have a professional political class? Citizens in our nation's history stepped out of private life and stepped into public service. And then they went home again after a time. Let me just close up here in a minute, but I want to talk about one other thing that's hugely important, and then take whatever questions you have. Nowhere is leadership more important now than in the world, because the world is a more dangerous and a more tragic place when we are not leading. And I don't mean rushing off to war, but I do mean having the United States stand tall with strength and resolve alongside our allies and have the courage to confront our adversaries. I know more world leaders on the stage today than anyone else running, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton. Like her, I have traveled hundreds of thousands of miles around the globe. But Mrs. Clinton, flying is an activity. It is not an accomplishment. I didn't do photo ops with these world leaders. I've talked with them about business or philanthropy or the state of the world. I've sat across a table from Vladimir Putin, and you don't have to spend a lot of time with him to understand that this is a formidable adversary who is after power, economic power, political power, territorial power, military power, and he isn't going to be stopped by a gimmicky red reset button. He will be stopped when we rebuild the Sixth Fleet, so he understands that we are prepared to defend NATO. He will be stopped when we conduct military exercises on a regular basis in the Baltic states. He will be stopped when we actually arm the Ukrainians. They've been asking us to do it for a long time. He will be stopped when we rebuild our missile defense program in Poland, which President Obama inexplicably just withdrew unilaterally. I remember sitting in Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel's office 5 years ago. It was a private meeting, 3 people, my husband Frank, me, and Bibi Netanyahu. There were no cameras, there was no election, and guess what he wanted to talk about 5 years ago? Iran, and the danger it represents to his country, the region, and the world. I know King Abdullah of Jordan, and remember what he did? When a Jordanian pilot was burned alive, he left this country, he went home to Jordan. He promptly executed 2 convicted terrorists without apology, and he started bombing. Our allies in the Middle East are asking us for things to help us, and we have not given them those things. Bibi Netanyahu has asked us over and over to stop talking to Iran, which of course we should. You know what I would do? You know what I would do? And it looks like Obama will sign this deal no matter what it says. We can talk about that in a moment. What I would do is immediately stop talking, stop everything, put financial sanctions on Iran, which we have a lot of power in the global financial system, put those sanctions back on and say, no more talk, no more relief, no more anything until you permit full and unfettered inspections of everything you are doing, which you agreed to, and the UN unanimously passed. The Iranians have never agreed to inspections, never. And so we continue to talk with them, and they continue to act badly. I've negotiated a lot of deals in my life, ladies and gentlemen, and you don't get a good deal unless you're prepared to walk away from the table and wait until you have a partner who's actually prepared to allow you to achieve your goals, and we have not achieved a single goal that we set out to negotiate. The Jordanians have asked us to supply them with bombs and materiel. That's why King Abdullah was here in this country when the Jordanian pilot was burned alive. We haven't given them to him. The Egyptians have asked us to share intelligence with them. We haven't. The Kurds have been asking us for 3 years now to arm them. We haven't. We don't have to rush off to war to solve these problems, but what we do need to do is stand with our allies. What we do need to have is moral clarity. No, Mr. President, it is not true that the Crusades and ISIS are equivalent. For once, my medieval history major So we need leadership in the world, and we need leadership in Washington, D.C., and we need citizenship as well. People to stand up and say, you know what, it's time to change the order of things for the better. It's time to restore the promise of this great nation. It's time to rise to our challenges once again and create for the 21st century a nation that is filled with possibilities for all Americans, regardless of their circumstances. I'm going to stop there and open it up and take any questions you have. Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining us today. You continue to speak out about corporate cronyism, and my question for you is, with Pentagon contractors like Northrop Grumman continually using their money and their influence in our political system, throwing it around and dictating what happens, oftentimes at the expense of the American taxpayer, what will you do to return the power to us and the voice to us, we the people?
You know, it's so interesting because, first of all, it's a great question, thank you. And there's no question that special interests of all kinds have a lot of influence in politics. What I find interesting is that every time we start talking about campaign finance reform of some kind, is politicians, honestly, of both parties, start carving out exceptions. Okay, well, we don't want these people to have money in the process, but these guys we're gonna grandfather. I mean, let's be honest, both sides do it. So here's my formula here. We gotta have a level playing field, so either everybody gets to play or nobody gets to play. You can't say companies don't get to play, but unions do. You can't say, Emily's List doesn't get to play, but the NRA does. I mean, both sides have done this. And so if we're gonna clean it up, and I have no problem with cleaning it up, we gotta clean it up for everybody so that the playing field is level. Here's the thing. Here's why reducing the cost, the complexity, the power of government is so important. Because when you have all that complexity, just think about it from a common sense point of view. If you look at something, any one of us look at something, and it's 30,000 pages long and we don't understand it, guess what? We know we're getting a raw deal. Okay? We don't know how, we just know we are, right? Well, that's what's going on. So if you can pay all these accountants and lawyers and lobbyists, they can burrow into the 30,000 pages and say, whoa, that's a nice exception, we could take advantage of that, but we can't. And so the best way to level the playing field here is to vastly simplify everything. The tax code, the regulatory thicket. We gotta start rolling back a whole bunch of things. All the EPA stuff that Obama's put out, we gotta roll back. The FCC just now, 2 months ago, even 1 month ago, published 400 pages of new regulation over the internet. Really, the FCC has no business and no competence regulating the internet, but guess who helped them write all that? Comcast, Verizon, Google, because they like the rules to be clear. So the point is, let's have the same rules apply to everybody. And in order for that to be true, they gotta be simple so that we can understand them.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
One institution that you haven't mentioned that's completely corrupt, in my opinion, is the media. How do you plan to deal with what you will get hostile questions, and you'll especially get hostile moral questions and gotcha questions, and they're all built on feelings instead of the truth. How would you deal with that?
Well, look, I'm a realist. I'm not gonna change the media. I can't change the media in the next 2 years. You know, we can't. And not all of them are corrupt, but a lot of them have a bias which they're not even aware of. They're not even aware of. Somebody once asked me, what's the biggest difference between business and politics? And business coverage and political coverage? And my answer was, politics is so frequently a fact-free zone. It's just a fact-free zone. You know, business, they're actually numbers. They're numbers. They're results. You know, as a CEO, I would have to talk to the press and anyone who wanted to listen every 3 months about absolutely everything. That was my job. I had to answer every question. I had to explain every number. I had to tell people what I was going to do. It was completely open and transparent, and you had to publish it all. There was no mystery about what was going on. Politics, that isn't how we roll. Now, I do think that there are so many other ways to get our message across to people now. So thank goodness. You know, we're not dependent on a couple networks or a couple outlets. We have blogs. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to get our message out. Ultimately, of course, I think we have to be prepared to fight the battle. So, you know, let me just pick one. Let me just pick one. I get asked all the time, you know, I'm pro-life. Okay, I ran in California for the US Senate as a proud pro-life conservative. You don't do that unless you really believe it, because it's not smart politically. And so people would challenge me all, how can you be pro-life? How can you support the extreme position of the Republican Party? And what I always say is, have you ever read the Democratic position? Nobody has, by the way. I said, well, here's what it is. Any abortion, any time, for any reason, at any point in the woman's pregnancy, right up until the last minute, to be paid for by taxpayers. A position summarily described as, by Barbara Boxer, my opponent in California, as, it's not a life until it leaves the hospital. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that? Well, people are horrified by that. They don't know it and they're horrified by it. And then I might go further and say, well, how do you feel about the fact that a 13-year-old girl needs her mother's permission to go to a tanning salon, but not to get an abortion? Hillary Clinton lobbied against parental notification. How do you feel about that? Most mothers are horrified by that. Most people are horrified by that. How do you feel about the fact that a tattoo parlor is more rigorously regulated and inspected than an abortion clinic? What do you think when you know, as science now tells us, that the DNA in a zygote is precisely the same DNA as the day you die? So, in other words, we also can't be afraid of these questions. We got to take them on. Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations for not bashing the current candidates that are out there now. How can we continue that same attitude? What I'm trying to get at is, so often we have so many candidates that are trying to run for president and they end up bashing each other.
Yeah. Well, look, I can't speak for any other candidate, and they're going to do what they're going to do. I would say that what I want to do is talk to Iowans and talk to the American people about why we need something different now. I bring to this race a totally different experience set, a totally different perspective. I'm not a political neophyte, but I'm also not a professional politician. And so I think I have a different approach to how we're going to solve problems. So what I want to talk about is the fact that I actually understand how the economy works, and I understand how the world works, and I understand how bureaucracies work, and I understand how technology works, and I understand executive decision making, which is making a tough call in a tough time with high stakes for which you're prepared to be held accountable. And I particularly want to talk about what really I think the fight in 2016 is all about. And I think it's going to be a fight. First of all, we need to unify this party. And I believe only a conservative can do that. You know, I told you I ran as a conservative in California, and I lost that election in the general election. But I won more Republican votes, more Democratic votes, and more independent votes than virtually anyone running anywhere in the nation that year. That's how big California is. So I know that we don't have to change our values and our positions to unify a party and reach beyond our party. And I think one of the biggest fights we have in front of us in 2016 is, what are our core beliefs about our fellow Americans? And I think the difference between conservatives and too many liberals is this. As a conservative, I know no one of us is any better than any other one of us. Every one of us is gifted by God. Every one of us has potential. And so I think the highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential for all. But I don't think too many liberals believe that. I think what they believe, honestly, is some are smarter than others. Some are better than others. Don't you worry, some of us are going to take care of others. And I think all the time, nothing enrages me more than people who are willing to sacrifice other people's lives and livelihoods at the altar of their ideology. And we are doing it all the time in this country now. So I think of the head of the Chicago Public Teachers Union, who takes to the microphones in the middle of a strike, and she says, we cannot be held accountable for the performance of children in our classroom because too many of them are poor and come from broken families. Really, think about that. So what she's saying is, if you're poor and you come from a broken family, you don't have potential, and we can't teach you. Never mind, we'll take care of you later in life. We cannot be a country that believes that some people need to be taken care of. Yes, every one of us needs a helping hand sometimes. Yes, every one of us needs somebody to take a chance on us. But every one of us has God-given gifts, and they want to live a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. That is the fight we have in front of us, I believe.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You're experienced with bureaucracies, and you mentioned that that's a problem. My belief is that the number one goal of bureaucracies is to maintain themselves.
Of course.
So
Preserve the status quo.
Or grow it even. So when we want to try to tackle that system in Washington, you mentioned, for example, reducing budgets of these bureaucratic institutions, never mind eliminating departments, just trying to shrink the Department of Education or the Department of Commerce is a Herculean task. How will you go about that?
It's of course the right question. And the short answer to this question, and then I'll give you some details. The short answer to this question is, It takes both leadership and citizenship, and both of those things are important. So let's just start. First, we have to go to zero-based budgeting. There are a lot of states that do it. We could do it in the federal government. Why is that so important? Because unless you know where money is being spent, you can't prioritize it. And so what happens in a bureaucracy, and by the way, it happens in business or government. What happens in a bureaucracy is you say, look, we have a problem. We need to, we need to spend money on something, whatever it is. Pre-K education, weaponry, whatever it is, we need to spend money on something. Oh, all the money we have is used. There's nothing we can do. We got to grow the budget. That's how bureaucracies behave. And so unless you can see how your money is being spent, you cannot prioritize. So we need to do that. Now, why do I say that? Of course it takes leadership. It takes a leader to stand up and say, we are going to zero-based budgeting. The states have done it, we can do it. Why does it take citizenship? Because citizens have to, at that point, flood the political process with support for that idea. This is where, actually, I'll give you an example, where technology could be extremely useful. How many people vote for American Idol every week? Or The Voice? Or any one of these shows, right? You pull out your cell phone and you vote, okay? What would happen if the President of the United States said, I believe we need to go to zero-based budgeting. I'd like all the American people to vote, to weigh in on this. 1 for yes, 2 for no. What do you suppose that would do to the political system? There'd be a lot of pressure, and I am willing to bet that the vast majority of American people would say, yes, we need to know where our money is being spent. The second thing we have to do is ask the fundamental question, why are we doing this here? Why are we doing this here? Why are we doing this at all? And start saying, we don't need to be doing this. And believe me, we have reports that outline hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars that we do not need to be spending, and we never do anything about it. So let's go after that first. Let's go after that first. We need to have a pay-for-performance system, without a doubt. Sometimes, one last comment here, sometimes people will say, well, you can't reduce, by the way, we need less revenue going to the government, not more, not neutral, less. Because the only way you get people in bureaucracies to start to think differently about their mission is to give them less money. It's just human nature. So we got to, tax reform, yes, it has to be much simpler and it has to produce less revenue. You will hear a lot of people say, we cannot reduce the federal government budget unless we tackle entitlement reform. It's where most of the money is. You know what? It's where about 70% of the money is. Have you ever run anything, your family budget, your anything? Have you ever run anything where you said, you know what, this 30% of spending is like huge amounts more. We're just going to ignore it, even though we know there's a whole bunch of ways. We're just going to ignore that. Why is it that politicians always go for the hardest problem first, so they don't have to deal with the obvious problems in front of them? So before we start talking about entitlement reform and taking something away from the American people, let's get after the hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, waste, and abuse. Yes, sir.
This past November, the American people delivered a sea change, a political sea change in the Senate and added to the Congress, and absolutely nothing came of it. That's the political bureaucracy and the fear of the media. How do you deal with that? We were really encouraged as a country. We did deliver a political sea change for nothing.
Well, again, the short answer is leadership and citizenship, okay? We have to be honest and say that the sea change that was delivered caused the president to say, I'm just going to go do whatever I want. I mean, that's what happened. Yes, there has been less progress in Congress than I too would like. But we have to acknowledge that this president took that rebuke from the American people, and that's what it was. It was a rebuke of the president.
Congressional or Senate leadership could stand up and fight it if there indeed is leadership, and we thought we delivered that.
Well,
didn't happen.
That's why I say, sometimes people get so caught up in the system that they have been in their whole lives that they don't see it for what it is anymore.
Well, that's
They
the
get,
challenge.
yes, they get captured by the back and forth, the tactical advantage. You know, fish swim in water and they don't know they're in water. So that is why I truly believe that leadership now to truly change the order of things for the better is going to have to come from outside the political class. Because I think we who are outside it see it for what it is. Yes, sir.
I told you a while ago you were on my list, you just went up the ladder.
Well, thank you, sir.
I've been in healthcare, not as a doctor, for 56 years. So healthcare is very important to me. There's a lot of other important issues, but I'd like us to stop calling it Obamacare and call it for what it really is, Hillary Care. She's the one that designed it. It came out of the closet somewhere and come forward, but that's where it started.
Well, you're absolutely right. It started with Hillary Clinton when she was First Lady and decided that it was her job, even though she was not elected, to rework the health care system in this country. And I do think that Republicans, when Hillary Care failed, I think Republicans missed an opportunity. They did not see the opportunity right in front of them. At that time, the Republican Party should have put forward an alternative to Hillary Care, knowing that it was coming back. It was easy to predict this was coming back. So here's what I think we should do. So let's just be clear about Hillary Care, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Everyone agreed with the goals. You know, yes, people should have access to quality, affordable health care. Yes, people should have health insurance. I'm a cancer survivor. I know it's not okay that people go bankrupt because somebody has a pre-existing condition. So we all agreed with the goals. But of course, this is what the political process does too often, and Democrats do it really well. They come up with a great name, the Affordable Care Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, the Equal Pay for Equal Work. I mean, they come up with these great names, and then they write these boil the ocean peaches of legislation that really don't achieve the goals at all. Hillary Care, Obamacare, the law is longer than a Harry Potter novel. Okay? It's longer than a Harry Potter novel. By the way, it's not nearly as interesting. So guess what? Nobody read it. Nobody read it. Except, of course, the lobbyists, the health insurance companies who were help writing it, the drug companies who were help writing it, because they didn't want to be on the menu. They wanted to try and control the rules. I mean, I get it. I understand why they were, but it's just a fact. They were. And then that Harry Potter novel was accompanied by tens upon tens of thousands of pages of regulation. No one can understand this. And so what's happened? Hospitals are consolidating to deal with it. Health insurance companies are consolidating to deal with it. Let us do what I think is the obvious solution here. First, let's ask the states to manage high-risk pools. There are really people, not as many perhaps as Obama tells us, but there are truly people who need help. So good, let's help them. And let's help them in the states. Many states did this before Obamacare. We can create high-risk pools that are targeted. And then let's try. The one thing we have never tried in health insurance, what have we never tried? The free market. Never. Health insurance has been a regulated oligopoly, where health insurance companies and regulators get together and write the rules. It's been that way for 100 years. We've had 50 state regulated oligopolies. Now we just have one big national regulated oligopoly. Let's try the free market. Real competition. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a mom of an F-16 fighter pilot, and I can tell you that the morale in the military is awful because of the leadership. And the other thing that really terrifies me is the ISIS hit lists that came out of 100 officers in the U.S. And the Pentagon says they can't do anything to protect those guys and girls. Anyway, what would you do to help the morale? I mean, it's really bad.
Well, you know, it would help if the president, the commander-in-chief, would more frequently listen to his commanders. because then, at least as a start, we would send a signal that the commanders are respected. And there are so many examples of where people in the military have provided very clear advice and it has been rejected and they have been retired. You know, James Mattis, from 2010 to 2013, who commanded forces in the Middle East. Mike Flynn, head of DNI, a wonderful man, wonderful military man, who is very open about the fact that he provided very clear recommendations to this president, not about how to rush off to war, but how to push back against our adversaries, how to push back against ISIS, how to push back against Iran's proxies. And when they stand up, they're retired. It would help if we had a commander-in-chief who didn't so clearly make military decisions based on political considerations, which he is. All those things would help. But look, we have to have, without a doubt, the strongest military on the face of the planet, and everybody has to know it. That doesn't mean that the Department of Defense is perfect. It's not. In fact, the Department of Defense is a giant bureaucracy as well. And if you look at, you know, I served on the Defense Business Board for several years under both Rumsfeld and Gates, and I did several pieces of work for those two secretaries. And if you, in the military, as you probably know, and God bless you for your service, because families also serve, and your son, in the military, they talk about something called the tooth-to-tail ratio. Tooth is fighting men and women. You know, people out on the, not all fighting every day, but out on the front lines, doing what needs to be done to protect our nation. Tail is the bureaucracy, the administration, I'm sorry? As in, yes. So what we have right now is the tooth-to-tail ratio is as bad as it's ever been. So we are cutting down on the tooth, and the tail just keeps growing. So should we spend what is necessary to have the strongest military in the world? Should we spend what is necessary to support our men and women? Look, I know, our daughter has a friend whose son is in Afghanistan. And his mom is sending him in the mail blankets, sheets, food. This is unbelievable. You do that. And it's not just cookies from home, it's necessities. So we need to spend what's necessary to support the tooth, and we need to reform what's necessary back in the tail. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk about immigration?
Yes, immigration. So look, immigration is, to me, a classic example of the political class just not getting it done. Let's start with the obvious. We have to secure the border. The government can secure the border. It's sort of the basic role of government. Protect the nation and secure the border. The border hasn't been secure. It hasn't been secure under Republicans or Democrats. It's not secure. So let's do it. You know, it's not hard. It takes manpower and money and will, but it's not hard. Let's do that. Because if we don't do it, the problem gets worse. If we don't do it, our enemies know we have a porous border. Don't think ISIS doesn't know we have a porous border. We have Chinese, there's a whole industry now of, black market trade of women come in, Chinese women come into this country to have their children so their children can be American citizens. I mean, our porous border is being taken advantage of. If we don't close the border, secure the border, what happens? People's faith in government is corroded because they say, wow, if you can't do the basics, if you can't take care of my son who's an F-16 pilot and you can't secure the border, you can't do anything. And that's corrosive over time because there is a real and important role for a functioning federal government. Second, the legal immigration system has been broken for decades and no one's fixing it. We have 16 different visa programs in this country. We've had them for a long time. They're contradictory. Half the people who are here illegally came on a legal visa, overstayed it, and nobody bothered to do anything about it. We don't have a system that really works in terms of verifying people's legal status when they try and get a job. We send the wrong people home. We let the wrong people in. The legal immigration system is a mess. Let's fix it. And finally, we have to deal with, what do we do with people who've come here illegally and stayed here illegally? And in my opinion, they don't ever get to be citizens. Because I know too many people who've earned the privilege of citizenship the right way. They've studied. They've taken the oath. They understand what it means to be a citizen. And so I don't think it's fair to say to people, you know, you've played by the rules, you've done the hard work, you've earned the privilege of citizenship, and this person over here never did. Maybe they have the same thing you do. I just don't think that's fair. So maybe those people someday get legal status, maybe their children get to be citizens at some point, but there have to be consequences. There have to be consequences for breaking the law. Okay, we have time for one last question, or not even one. Oh my gosh, Loretta's the hook, the gentle hook. Well, I don't want to overstay the, yes, sir. Does anyone else who hasn't had a chance yet to ask a question have a question? Yes, sir.
Good question. I thought your idea of asking young veterans to figure out what happens and what should happen in the mental division is a great one. How about taking your top 10, 50, whatever problems, get focus groups, get back to you within 3 months with your recommendations.
I think it's a great idea. And by the way, you know, I really do think it's a great idea. It's that, you know, citizens know what's wrong. Like I said, you know, I would go to a problem and people would know what to do. No one had ever asked them. Well, I really have a lot of faith in people's common sense and judgment, and I do think people know what's wrong. To your point, you know, I said, have we ever repealed a regulation? I mean, I'm not aware of a single one we've ever repealed, and so the weight of this is what's crushing these small and family-owned businesses. We're destroying more businesses than we're creating. Think about what that says. So you know what I would do? I would take every one of those regulations. I would put them all out on the internet. It's not hard, folks. Not in the 21st century. This isn't hard to do. Put them all out there. And then maybe we'd ask people, you know, 5 stars, let's keep it. 1 star, they're off the island. Whatever. Some way to say, I know I'm mixing my analogies here, but you get the point. The point is, let's ask people. Let's get a focus group of small business owners and say, what do you think about these? What are helpful? What are harmful? Absolutely. Let me just close by saying, first of all, thank you so much for your warm welcome. I need your help. A lot of people still don't know who I am. Okay, I haven't been in politics all my life. So there are a lot of people who say, who's she? What's she think? People are most influenced by people they know. You all know a lot of people. So you would do me a great service if you would leave here today and you would talk to friends and neighbors and colleagues and people you work and worship with and tell them about what you heard and what you think. In a couple weeks now, I'll declare. And then I'll really need help, because I do think this is going to take leadership and citizenship. A single person cannot do it alone. I don't care how big their office is. It's going to take, like everything else worthwhile, it's going to take a big team effort. And I need your help here in Iowa, and I will need all Americans' help. I will close with just one last thought. You know, we celebrate our founding fathers, as we should. They were leaders of great vision and courage. But 2 of the most powerful symbols of this blessed, beautiful nation are women. Lady Liberty and Lady Justice. Lady Liberty stands. She is clear-eyed. She is resolute. She faces outward into the world, which is the way America must always face. She holds her torch high because it is a beacon of hope in a troubled world. And Lady Justice, she holds a sword in one hand because she is a fighter. She is a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. And she holds a scale in the other hand. And with that scale, she says, oh, all of us are equal in the eyes of God. And so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And I think what that blindfold calls upon us to remember and restore in this nation is, with that blindfold, she says, it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from or what your circumstances are. Here, every American's life is filled with possibilities, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.